Good afternoon, class. My name is Miro, and today we have a geeky Hoya video. It's been a while since our Hoya school was last in session, but the time has finally come to put our glasses on, or we have never taken them off, really, not in my case at least. Take out our notebooks, because notes will be necessary like it's 1999, and you can sing Hit Me Baby One More Time. That's a Charlie XCX reference for you Hoya brats. I have a Hoya today that is almost out of bloom, and it is this Hoya right here that needs an ID, because sometimes Hoya sellers will sell you a plant and they will sell it under one name, and they will even courageously slap on true onto the name of that Hoya to really lock in that sale, and then the plant will bloom and it turns out, well, sometimes true isn't really true, and you end up like Julius Caesar surrounded by Brutuses. It's either that or, it was an honest mistake, but I'm not sure about that. After all, I do have some trust issues. Actually, the term trust issues gets thrown around quite casually. In fact, exactly like that moniker, true, when they slap it on to the name of the Hoya, but in reality, it can be a mix of several negative behavioral patterns. I don't know if you noticed this, but more and more we are diagnosing people online, and we throw around these terms like they mean nothing, and we very loosely apply them to other people. And I think this has become quite a big issue. It's been becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and sometimes I also get comments that I have X, Y, or Z, so then I spiral for an entire afternoon. I look up the symptoms online and I get educated more about it. Some of these things, it's easy to tell them if you have them or not. I definitely have struggled in the past with anxiety, self-doubt, some needy behavior, quite attached, emotional sensitivity because I am a Taurus. So that's what we do, emotionally sensitive little flower. And turns out all of these things actually are ingredients to a very delicious trust issue soup. It's a joke. It's neither delicious nor is it a soup. I myself have been working in the last few years on moving past some of these issues, or at least learning how to cope with them a little bit better. And one way that you can do that is through therapy. BetterHelp is the paid partner of this video, and their goal is to make starting therapy easier through their online therapy platform. Starting therapy can be quite a big challenge for a lot of us, included, and for some people it is just not a big thing. But again, for a lot of us it is a big step, and BetterHelp makes taking that step, well, a lot easier and less scary. They connect you with a credentialed therapist who is trained to listen to you and give you helpful, unbiased advice and provide you with a different perspective. All you need to do to get started is to fill out a quick questionnaire, and you will be matched with a therapist as soon as possible. And if for whatever reason the therapist that you get matched with is not the right fit for you, which is quite normal and it does happen, it is very easy to switch to a new one at no extra cost to you. With over 7,000 reviews and 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can truly trust. You can click the link in the description, or you can visit the link that is on the screen, betterhelp.com/basieplans. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/basieplans to get 10% off your first month of therapy. Thank you, BetterHelp, for being the paid partner of this video. And now for the rest of you, the class begins. I do need to put a lengthy disclaimer what this video is going to be and what this video is not going to be. So we are going to go through steps that I also use on how to identify Hoya species with the plants that have bloomed. This is not going to be how to identify Hoya species based on the leaves, because that is a thankless job. It is sometimes even thankless, just the whole Hoya identification. Sometimes you will go through all of these steps and the ending result may not be very satisfying because you might run into a dead end. With leaves, it can be worse. There's just a very, very high chance of, mistaken ID. So we're not going to be dealing with that. And on the example that I have today, you will actually see why that is problematic, because it's because of the leaves that this plant was sold to me under a different name. Well, actually, it wasn't sold to me, but we're going to get into that. And this video is also not going to be how to identify cultivars, because if Hoya identification is hard and IDing based on the leaves is quite thankless, cultivars, it's just a whole different story. And it's going to be very challenging, very lengthy, so many things that need to be considered. So we just cannot get into that now. I do not feel comfortable getting into that because I certainly do not want to contribute to more confusion and more misinformation. However, there is going to be the cultivar video that was supposed to happen in November with Rachel Colette Conroy, but Rachel was quite busy, so we had to push the video to January, especially because I actually did not deliver any of the questions that you got to Rachel. So someone could say it's my fault, but that someone is definitely not me. So those are the disclaimers. So based on that, obviously the first thing that you will need is a Hoya in bloom before step number 1. Step number 1, when you have your Hoya in bloom that is mislabeled or unidentified species, at least to you unidentified, we need to learn how to look at the flower. And to do that, we actually need to know the parts of the Hoya flower. So the first thing that appears is, of course, the peduncle. That's the first thing that we see, and that makes us happy when our Hoya is about to bloom. Now we have persistent and temporary peduncles. The peduncle on this plant is persistent. On most Hoya, it will be persistent or somewhat persistent. What does this mean? Well, the Hoyas, if you noticed, if they rebloom from the same peduncle, there is a thing that gets longer and longer, and that is called rachis. And it essentially, they rebloom from there, and with each reblooming, you sort of get an additional spiral, layering, whatever you want to call it, and with years it gets longer and longer. This is called persistent peduncle, and they don't have to last a lifetime. Sometimes they will get 2-3 bloomings and then they will fall off. Sometimes they can stay on for years. In my Hoya mitrata, they have been on for 5 years until I broke them off by accident. So they can persist for a very long time, and the rachis can get quite long. On the other hand, we have a temporary peduncle in species like Hoya acuminata, for example, where all the flowers sort of come from the center, all the pedicels, so that's the next part of the flower, they come from the center, from a singular point. When you have persistent peduncles, they sort of arrange themselves like a spiral, and they don't all just come from the center, they go kind of on the outside. But with acuminata, it's all from kind of like a single point. That's the vibe. That's what it looks like. These will just get through one blooming and then they are going to fall off. This is not so important, but I think it was interesting, so I wanted to include it, though it can actually be helpful when determining what Hoya species you have, because if you have a temporary peduncle, well, that's very limited number of species. The next thing is the pedicel, and at the end of the pedicel we have a calyx. Now, calyx is going to be very important, especially in this video, because, well, I already know sort of what my plant is, or at least with 90% conviction, 95% conviction, let's say. Maybe 98. So I already know why calyx is going to be important for us, but it is quite important when it comes to Hoya flowers. And calyx is those, if you turn your Hoya flower around, at the end of pedicel, you have like that star-shaped thing that has like 5 parts, like 5 triangles. These are transformed leaves. So is the rest of the flower. And we have 5 sepals here, those triangles, those lobes, they are called sepals. And essentially the role of the calyx is to protect the bud, the young bud, when it is developing. And here you need to know there are different shapes of the calyxes, and within the species they can vary a bit. They can be pubescent, non-pubescent, etc. And this is of course all important information that is going to be relevant to you when you try to determine what species you have. Now, the next and the most interesting parts for us are the corolla and the corona, and these are sort of the most showy parts of the Hoya flower and something that, makes us select or not select a species. Corolla is the bigger part, sort of the outer part, if I can say so myself, that has 5 lobes. And corolla can be reflexed, like in Hoya medianifolia, Hoya amrita, Hoya acuminata. With some species, it will roll back fully. This is revolute corolla, like in Hoya weimaniae or Hoya memoria. Sometimes it will be sort of flat. It can be campanulate with some species like, Hoya campanulata. But also a little bit with this plant. We are going to get into that. And even with the species where the corolla is reflexed, you will see as the flower opens or closes, you will see those lobes, those petals of the corolla. Finlaysonia verticillata, with many Hoyas, it is reflexed, so with lacunosa fully rolled back. And then there is the apex of the corolla lobe as well. Now, the corona is actually what is perhaps the most interesting for us when it comes to determining what species something is, especially when we look at a lot of similar species, because there's going to be some variation within the corona. In corona, so as I said, these are all transformed leaves, and it's all sort of fused into central portion, or it's called gynostigium. English is not my first language, so whatever pronunciation is correct, right? And we have the coronal lobes or the scales, the inner angle of the coronal lobe, and the outer angle, which is the apex. Now, I will read something that will show you the importance of the corona here, and I will put it on the screen. Each of the features of the gynostigium vary from species to species, but by far the most variable aspect of the corona are the corona lobes, which vary in shape, size relative to the corolla, ratio of height to width, height relative to the anther head, and color. The corona varies minutely between closely related species and dramatically throughout the genus. It is the single feature which has been used most commonly for classification purposes in this genus. It's very clear that learning how to look at the corona, learning to recognize the parts, and getting really good at observing the corona, different coronas among similar and different species, it's going to be very crucial when it comes to Hoya identification. I sometimes, when I try to identify the plant that I have or to confirm the ID, steps will be the same. I will take apart the flower to get really good photos and to get all the angles so I can really see if what I have matches the published material. My advice to you would be to get a really close look with either a magnifying glass or take your phone and take a close-up photo of the corona. The more that you look at them, the more it's going to be clear to you how some species relate or differ from one another. And I think there is a problem with Hoya identification there is a Hoya identification group on Facebook, and it's a fantastic place, wonderful group, but I see a lot of people who are learning, and this is I think true for everyone, even maybe for me in the beginning. When we look at the Hoya flowers, we focus on the color, we focus on the whole umbel, and we look at the leaves, but we don't look at the corona. So recently, what I remember, there was a case when there was the Hoya in bloom, and someone suggested it is Erythrina. Corona is so far from Erythrina, they're not even in the same section. I understand veiny leaves, right? And the coloration of the flower can be the same, but we need to learn how to look at these parts of the flower. Very important to know about the corona. And then, of course, it finishes off with the anther part, with the anther head, and then with the anther margins, which are the receptive areas. And then we have the pollinarium. We're not going to look closely at pollinarium today, but it can be useful to take a look at pollinarium as well. I find it pretty hard because I don't have a microscope, so this is why I typically don't do it, but in the event that one day I do get one, I will also take a look at pollinariums because it's just additional information when it comes to the ID of your plant. Now, I'm introducing all of these terms because they're going to be important to us a little bit later on in the video as we go through identifying this Hoya. I will guide you step by step, but as I said, I already sort of ID'd the plant. I will not bring up the meaning of these terms again, so you either have listened now or you're going to be lost. But I will try to circle the parts that we are looking at on photos as well as we go through the ID of this plant. And I think now we can move on to step number 2, which is very interesting, and it's Hoya sections. I have promised to make videos on Hoya sections before, and I just want to say we're going to look at Hoya sections today, and I'm going to tell you where to look for this information. The information currently that we have is from 2008 and 2009. It can be found on STEMMA Journal website. I will link all the relevant links down below so you can look. We are going to look at volume 3, issues 3 and 4, I think, or maybe 2 and 3. I can't remember exactly. We are going to look at 4 issues of STEMMA Journal. So you can find them online. You can find all the information about Hoya section and flower parts there as well. It's a very good read. It is a very complex read, which is why Mark Randal of STEMMA, the editor of STEMMA, is working on a revised article because there are some changes, there are some updates, there's more information, more species that need to be added to these lists, but it will be simplified eventually. Again, as I said, I was going to make some videos on it, and Mark hasn't finished yet, which, I mean, obviously, I can't make a video until he finishes it. God forbid I contribute to something. But like all jokes aside, Mark has been in the Hoya world for 2 decades, and I don't have a full decade even behind me. So what in the heck can I contribute? I think a lot of people who do watch this channel think that I know it all, but I don't know it all. And I'm also still learning about Hoya, and I'm happy to contribute when I can, especially when I can get the word out. But truly, the real heroes are people like Mark Randal, who are doing all this work. So make sure to check out STEMMA Journal's website. They have a Facebook group as well. And yeah, there's an issue coming up soon. Obviously, this is my fault. I also could have made Hoya sections videos before this was published, but I didn't because I'm late with everything, okay? Late with everything. There are 26 proposed sections. So based on the morphology of the flower and some other characteristics, we can group Hoyas into these 26 sections or groups. I'm going to leave you a chart on the screen so you can pause and look at that, but also I encourage you to go and take a look at STEMMA so you can see what these sections and complexes are. And I think familiarizing yourself with the sections is very useful because, well, you don't have to then look at all the Hoyas. You don't have to think much. You can take a Hoya like this and say, well, I don't know what this is, but the flower looks to me very much like Hoya australis, for example, right? So all I need to do is look, where does Hoya australis fit? And then I can get similar species. We have the list here of the Hoya sections, and as I said, some of these things have changed. So because I went through this and I know sort of what is where, you will see on this list under number, I'm lost, 16, Pterostelma. This is going to change too, the name, but the type is Hoya acuminata. So this has changed. Hoya acuminata is going to be standalone. So it's not going to be part of Pterostelma, and Pterostelma is probably not going to be called that. It will have a different name. So I know with a different name, it would be even easier to find it because it's going to be albiflora group. And this plant was actually sold to me as Hoya albiflora. We will get to that part. And I keep saying sold. Farah sent it to me, and I can't remember if we traded or it was a gift, whatever, it doesn't matter. But this plant was albiflora. That was the ID with true, albiflora true. So we can take a look at this, and then we are going to go to the Pterostemma section, which is in issue, I think, volume 2, issue 4. We can see then species thought to belong to this section or the complex. Now, as I said, some changes have been made here. This isn't really going to look like this. It's going to look a little bit different, but some species still stand. So this is not yet published, what I'm going to share, and I hope Mark is not going to be angry. But Acuminata is no longer part of this. As I said, she's going to be standalone. And when you read this, you will see there is a reason why Acuminata was there, what was thought before, but, you know, it was always sort of like borderline that it fits in here. The species that are included and that will remain included are Hoya calycina, Hoya magnifica. You can see Hoya odorata was already borderline, so not that. Albiflora will stay. Graveolens and Microphylla, no, from what I know at least, from what I've seen. But we will have Leucoroda lucida, which is relatively newly published species. Magnifica naumani species DAV 18 or BSI 1 and species UT 0 to 9. And as I said, Australis as well. There is definitely some change here, but that is okay. Even without the change, looking at the species that were thought to belong to this section complex, I could get my ID. So as I said, this plant was sent to me as Hoya albiflora true. As soon as it started to form the buds, and as the buds grew even a little bit, I knew this wasn't albiflora. There are some things about albiflora that make it stand out, and I will tell you what that is, and instantly it could not have been albiflora. So we took a look at this list. There are some things here like Calycina magnifica that this could be, but I also knew about addition of Hoya lucida here. And because I've been following this whole story around Hoya albiflora, we always sort of knew that there are plants out there that are being sold as albiflora but are not. Magnifica being one of them, lucida being another one of them. And then, you will see later on which else. But I knew potentially this could be Hoya lucida. So I looked at the publication of Hoya lucida as these buds were starting to grow. And at first, I didn't really suspect anything. I thought it was going to be Hoya lucida because I didn't properly take a look at the publication, to be quite honest with you. I just looked at what can I expect, so when the flowers open, I know what it is. But to be honest with you, there are a couple of things with Hoya lucida that immediately from the bud stage could tell me that this is not Hoya lucida. Another thing that I want to say is a plant like mine is being traded and sold everywhere as Hoya lucida. I have found only singular good photo of Hoya lucida, like good match photo and ID on Instagram. All the rest were mismatched. And it was this plant, sold as Hoya lucida. But let's take a look at publication of Hoya lucida and actually go to the third step in this process. But just a little bit before that on the Hoya section, as I said, it is very long. It's a ton of information, but sort of a shortcut is you can simply look at these charts. You can look at the individual groups, and you will already get a list of Hoyas that fit into there. So that's sort of like a cheat, and you don't really need to read everything. I understand this can be quite complex, quite difficult, and frustrating to understand. And a lot of the time, because English is not my native language, I do have to Google what the words mean. Some of the words that are used in botany. But I do think that's normal. I think everyone has to Google those. Let's go to the third step. And this step I mentioned before, it is consulting the publication. There are several places where you can check for the publications. I always go to Plants of the World online, and this is a very reputable source. You type in the name of the species like Hoya lucida, and you will see when this was published, who are the authors, and where it was published. You will also get some additional information. So we can see that Hoya lucida was published by Simonson and Rhoda. That is Natalie Simonson and Michele Rhoda. It was first published in Blumea, issue 67, page 146 in 2022. There are these numbers that sometimes are a little bit confusing to understand what's page, what's issue, what's volume, and I also struggle with that sometimes. We can see the native range of this species is Papua New Guinea, and it grows primarily in wet tropical biome. I like to go to Plants of the World online because sometimes there's going to be a herbarian specimen in there. But another place that is good is IPNI, ipni.org, ipni.org. And when we go there, it will also give us sometimes, in many cases, a way to get to the publication. Later on in this video, you're actually going to see how, because I will show you. But I already had the publication for Hoya lucida. Another great place is ResearchGate as well. So I had publication for Hoya lucida, and we can start looking at this side by side. It would be very useful if you, well, either had your plant in bloom at the time of doing this or you took great photos. My plant has been in bloom for a week and it's going to be out of bloom very soon because it took me a moment to sort of gather all this into coherent information stream, aka the video. We can start by comparing my photos to what we have here because I did take, as I said, somewhat detailed photos. First, we will look at the frontal view of the flower and compare lucida to my Hoya. And instantly we see that something is off here. And that is the size of the corona, the center part, in relation to the corolla. We can see that the corona is much smaller in Hoya lucida. At least this size relation is much bigger. And we can see in my plant the corona appears to be bigger and more closer in size to the corolla. That is the first thing that stands out to me. Don't look so much at the coloration. Based on the camera settings, white can appear creamier or purer white. So don't look at the color of the flower. May April, who is now, I believe, editor of Hoya Telegrafen. She's a Swedish collector. I mentioned her before many times. She has the website Frostwitta. Very knowledgeable about Hoya. Clearly, I'm not because I can't even speak. She said to me once, and this is such a great tip, put the photo in black and white. So then you're not distracted by the color at all. And all that you're focusing on is the morphology, on the shapes, right? Because that's what matters here. When we look at these flowers, it doesn't matter that lucida is a little bit appears kind of creamier. This can be due to camera settings. It's very easy to make a flower, white flower, look almost yellow, and vice versa, yellow look almost white. It's all temperature of the light. The other thing that I notice right away is the shape of the petals of the corolla, where we can see they're wider in Hoya lucida and the tip is a little bit different. The way that kind of turns into that tip, it's a little bit different with Hoya lucida than with my Hoya. Those are first two red flags. Then let's take a look at the back of the flower, and here is where we can see the calyx. Don't, again, look so much, my pedestal is red, this other pedestal is not, but the calyx is different. With Hoya lucida, you can see it is longer and narrower. With my plant, it's like little fat triangles with equal sides and quite short. So that is another red flag. Then right next to it, we can see the bud. Because I've been taking photos of my Hoya when it was in bud, I can already see the bud looks different too. And this is going to be mentioned later in this publication. We are going to get a good idea what my plant could be. But the bud also looks different. You can see that with this plant, it sort of is flat. With my plant, it doesn't look like that. And lastly, we can take a look at the corona, at the side view and the top view. And once again, we see there are differences here. Maybe not super extreme because these species are closely related. And as we said, when they're closely related, there's going to be less variation. And Here we can see that with lucida, the angle under which these corona lobes are is a little bit steeper. Mine is more horizontal, and the anther looks different. Mine is a little bit taller. Here it is not as tall with lucida. So that is enough red flags to essentially let us know this is not Hoya lucida. But let's keep reading the publication of Hoya lucida. So they say it's similar to Hoya magnifica, which is also in the same section, and another potential ID. Very quickly, we're going to see why it's not an ID. So it's similar to magnifica in having large, narrowly elliptic to broadly ovate leaves, white campanulate flowers, but distinguished by the stem and leaf pubescence. It's glabrous with Hoya lucida or sparsely pubescent versus densely pubescent in magnifica. I have my plant. These leaves are glabrous, they're not densely pubescent, so this could not be Hoya magnifica. I will say I saw several posts on Instagram that do show this plant and they call it magnifica, but this is not Hoya magnifica. So we are back to Hoya lucida. But you will see it's very important to skim through these publications because sometimes you're gonna get a hint, especially when they're publishing new species. They will tell you it is similar to this and this and this, but this is why it's different. And in this and this and this, that's where our ID lies. The next thing that is interesting to me is this calyx, because I know calyx is a very important part that we use for identification, and it says calyx is 12 to 15 millimeters in diameter, lobes narrowly lanceolate 4 to 6 by 2 to 3 millimeters, apex acute, outside glabrous, inside glabrous. This is a little bit more complex because what does lanceolate mean? So I use several different charts that are online to help me with these shapes to understand them better and what my shape is. I'm not blind, so I can see that these are not the same shapes. Where it becomes tricky is to tell you exactly what my shape is and what I would call it. But essentially what I would call the shape of my calyx is ovate. So not lanceolate, but it's more looking ovate with also somewhat acute apex. This is very different. Oh, I don't have a ruler now and I haven't measured. I may measure and write it down, but again, my eyesight works, so I can see that it's not 4 to 6 millimeters long with 2 to 3 millimeters wide. I would say this is approximately, let's break off a flower here, probably 2 millimeters wide, maybe 3, and 2 or 3 millimeters long. As I said, it's essentially like a triangle with equal sides. So it's not match for Hoya lucida from the publication. In the notes of publication for Hoya lucida, they compare it to Hoya magnifica, what separates it from magnifica, but also what separates it from Calycina subspecies glabrifolia. Now this is where it gets interesting. Based on the herbarium records, specimens of Hoya lucida are often misidentified as Hoya calycina subspecies glabrifolia because of the large glabrous or glabrescent leaves and large flowers. And indeed, this one has large glabrous leaves and both have white, large flowers. It's easy to misidentify them, and on top of it, Hoya albiflora has very similar leaves as well, which is why this thing was sold as Hoya albiflora. Both taxa are widespread in the mountains of New Guinea and cannot be distinguished when not in flower, hence the issue. But upon seeing living materials, we notice that Hoya lucida has flattened buds and more broadly campanulate corollas that are thinner and flexible upon touch, while the buds are rounded and the corolla is stiffer and succulent in Hoya calycina subspecies glabrifolia. And indeed, when we look at the flower of my plant, it is a little bit campanulate, but if you look at Hoya lucida, it is more campanulate on that plant. But moreover, as I said before, the petals are wider. I found it very interesting here to read about the buds that are flattened in lucida and not in calycina, because exactly you will see in the photos, my buds are not very flat at all. They're little round lumps. So it cannot be Hoya lucida. And another thing, it's stiffer and more succulent, so it's not very thin and not very flexible upon touch, the corolla of my plant. So I don't know how many red flags that is, but it's plentiful, and everything really points to Hoya calycina. As we go through this publication, everything that I read about Calycina subspecies glabrifolia is actually what my plant looks like. So it cannot be Hoya lucida. Still, I want to tell you, you will see with all Asian sellers this plant being sold as lucida. Not just Asian, also in Europe. I have took a look at several shops. They will post the photo of this flower as Hoya lucida. Maybe some of them are actually lucida when they bloom, because again, topic for another video, these plants, they get chopped and they get sold. Even the shops, they import these plants, they chop them, they sell them, they don't wait for the flower to confirm the ID. So maybe you will get a lucida, actually, maybe not. The only way for you to know is to ask the seller, not just with Hoya lucida, with any Hoya, have you bloomed it? What does it look like? Can you show me the photo of the flower? If you, of course, know that it's a species that is often mislabeled, right? So if it's species that's not mislabeled, then what's the point of asking, I know that next time I try to get Hoya albiflora, I will absolutely ask for the photo of the flower. And I will try to get lucida as well. I do know who has it in Sweden, aside from Natalie Simonson. But with albiflora too, I will make sure to ask, have you bloomed it? Can I see the photo? But now let's continue. We're still on step number 3. This is quite a long one because now we need to discover more about Hoya calycina. We go back to Plants of the World online to see where Hoya calycina was published. I have already done that, and I have also gone to IPNI to find this publication. So we will do that. We will go to Calycina subspecies glabrifolia. And we see this has been published in Austrobiolea in volume 3, issue 4, page 633 in 1992. And if you click here under the publication, it will lead you to another page, and towards the bottom you see read this publication. That leads you to another external link. Now, these websites are a little bit slow. There's a ton of information. I assume that is why. We'll give this moment to load. We get to biodiversitylibrary.org. And here we see issues of Austrobiolea all the way from 1977. Don't bother, they're not Hoya there. They essentially around 1992 start to appear. So we look for volume, did I say volume 3 or 4? Volume 3, issue 4, if I'm not mistaken. And we get that issue. It will lead you to another external link, and I almost always download these things because you never know how long something is going to be available online, so I make sure to have everything. This is by David Liedl, the entry, and it's actually quite useful because we have on page 628 revision of the New Guinea whites. So this is Hoya magnifica, albiflora, naumani, australis calycina. This is a revision because these species were published before. So we can see what Hoya magnifica looks like, and we can take a look at this. Here, you're not going to find photos, you're going to find sketches. I love to see a good Hoya sketch. I do prefer the photo because it's a little bit less ambiguous, but these are fantastic sketches. And you will see with Hoya magnifica also the difference between the corona and corolla, but also look at that calyx. It's huge. It sort of really encapsulates the corolla, but you can see it's also densely pubescent on this. So it's not Hoya magnifica, though the leaves kind of look like they could be similar, but we know they're pubescent. We have albiflora, which is the next one. Also with the big calyxes, that's what makes albiflora stand out. And it's very easy to know this plant is not Hoya albiflora because look at how huge those calyxes, the red calyxes are. My plant does have red calyxes and red pedicels, but they're not the same. you can see how much bigger the calyx is on albiflora. And of course, the corona is different as well. So we continue to Hoya calycina, which is actually what interests us, and we see their subspecies calycina and glabrifolia. Calycina subspecies calycina is what you see most frequently. It's the pubescent one, and we see lamina is with dense velutinous indumentum below. It is pubescent. Calyx and corolla with sparse to dense edumentum externally. With glabrifolia, which is what interests us, it says lamina glabrous or scattered edumentum below. So it is not pubescent, or sometimes a little bit, it's a scattered pubescence, but it's glabrous leaf, which means, again, not hairy, to simplify these things. Unfortunately, you will see we don't have much on Hoya calycina subspecies glabrifolia, except that species are examined in Papua New Guinea, the location here. There is a description in Latin, but this relates to Schlachter's description of Hoya calycina, subspecies calycina. It's interesting when you look at the distribution and habitat that it's widespread but rarely collected in Papua New Guinea, and it grows as a liane in rainforest at 1500 to 1900 meters. Maybe this is the reason why it was sort of late to be introduced into horticulture, into the trade, because it was rarely collected. It is a big plant, and perhaps it wasn't as interesting before, or maybe there wasn't so much interest. That would be more accurate. There wasn't as much interest in Hoya before. My conclusion after looking at this, and then we can look at the sketch. Unfortunately, we do not have a sketch for calycina subspecies glabrifolia, but we do have a sketch for calycina subspecies calycina, and I do have Hoya calycina, and there are plenty of photos online where we can really see that the corolla shape is a very good match. Corona, somewhat too. There is still a slight difference, but that could be normal, and then calyx is a pretty good match as well here. This, in my opinion, 95% is calycina subspecies glabrifolia, or maybe there is another variation that I'm not aware of, but I doubt it. I would like to say, if you look up Hoya calycina subspecies glabrifolia, you're not going to find photos on Instagram. Online, you may find one of the first Google searches is hoyas.ru. This is a Russian forum on Hoya, and actually probably the only one where there is a photo of calycina subspecies glabrifolia, and it is exactly that. That is exactly my plant. The only difference is that this one has red pedicels, but that is just a variation of the species. These things are not enough to separate it as a new species. Maybe a cultivar, a natural occurring cultivar, but not a different species. So I posted my findings because I think there was Wendy Wills in Hoya Identification who actually bloomed this plant at the same time as me, and was very disappointed when she saw this was not Hoya albiflora. So I posted a lengthy reply, not to show off, but to help out and to essentially give my reasoning why I think this is calycina subspecies glabrifolia, because the last thing I want is for someone to come in and, then it's like a whole back and forth. So it's better to just write everything that you know right away. When you try to convince people this is a different species than what it was thought. So the seller also thought it was albiflora. It got sold. Later she reached out. They thought it was lucida, but then I said, well, not quite lucida either. But in defense of the sellers, it is definitely getting distributed as Hoya lucida. So that's something to take a note of. When you buy Hoya lucida, if you're looking for that one, I wrote what I think, and I did tag Natalie and Michele. I could have asked personally, because I do sometimes ask things from them, but it's the holidays, so I didn't want to bother anyone. Maybe after the holidays, I will confirm the ID on this. I would be very surprised if this actually turns out to be lucida. There's just way too many things that separate it from lucida, and I'm surprised also that no one jumped in to argue, because that's what some Asian sellers like to do. is because they want to defend their reputation, I suppose, though I never said who this is from nor who sells this as. It's very easy to find if you type in Hoya lucida. You will very quickly see these photos, who sells them, under what name, etc. I do not plan to get into arguments with anyone. That's not the goal of this. Everyone can make a mistake, and as long as you admit it, it's fine. But I find that some people can be quite aggressive. This is why I posted the entire thing, because I have several reasons, I have so much proof to show that this is not Hoya lucida. And if someone comes out, a botanist says, no, that's Hoya lucida, then I'll be like, well, why is lucida a separate species? Why is it not Calycina then? Because this is far closer to Calycina than to Hoya lucida. It's really Calycina, unless, they decide to reclassify that, which I don't think that is going to happen. There is really no reason for that to be reclassified. And I do think that Hoya calycina is a pretty variable species. When I talked with Mark, we also talked about species UT029, which also seems to be calycina or maybe australis, but I would lean more towards Hoya calycina subspecies glabrifolia. Another thing, because we're talking about these publications here, you see Austrobilea. We have sketches but not photos. The further you go back, the less of that is going to be. So you're sometimes going to be left only with Latin description. This is why things like Hoya cards that Patamet makes, Hoya Study Corner by SC Plants on Facebook. This is why these things come very useful, because while it doesn't cover all the species, it covers a lot of species. So you can look there at the photo of a published species, and if you have something that's sold to you as no ID, you can actually see if it matches that, because the photos that Patamet takes, they are very good, very detailed, on the level of the publication. Another person is Blake Vespiers on Instagram, you will see. I will write, again in the description, everything that I think is a good source, but it is essentially on the level of the publication. Again, the detail in the photos, the way that they take photos, the angles. So it really makes this much easier, because again, as you go back, less and less sketches are available, less and less photos. There are herbaria specimens, but I don't find that super useful, especially when you look at them online. It's very hard to determine it's dry material and you are not seeing it in person. You can kind of look at it and see maybe, but for me, it would be pretty difficult to look at the dry material and based on that alone say what species something is. It's also difficult for botanists, which is why these mistakes happen. I do believe we do have dry material for Calycina glabrifolia. We absolutely do. There is no photo of the flower. There is something that's probably a flower, but at least based on the leaves, you can see that is very similar. But you can see based on the photo of the herbaria specimen, it's pretty hard to determine what a species is for us who are not trained botanists. And this all leads us to fourth step, which is you can ask, of course, for help from the online Hoya community. You can ask in Hoya identification. It's a great place to get identification. I also just want to say another disclaimer, because this happened when I made my Macrophylla latifolia video. Some people think, I read the comments and I quickly make a video. This video has been in the works for weeks. My Patreons know this. Ever since this plant pushed out very tiny buds, I've been following them very closely, and I started to look back then at lucida publication, albiflora, etc. So it's not just based on Facebook posts. That was really funny to me when I made the Macrophylla/latifolia video, because it was a coincidence that at the same time Macrophylla and latifolia started to get discussed. Much before that, I actually started to research for that video as well, which is how a lot of people subscribed, so I hope now too. But anyway, back to the fourth step, which is asking for help from online community. I do think this should be the last step, at least if you want to be sure in the ID, because a lot of people can chime in and give you a suggestion what they think your Hoya is, which is all great. This is how we learn, but sometimes these suggestions can be quite misleading. So for example, I went through all of this and I posted what I posted about why I think this is Hoya lucida. And if someone comes in and tells me, or sorry, why I think this is Hoya calycina, subspecies glabrifolia, so if someone comes in and tries to convince me this is albiflora, I have so much proof why it isn't. Same with Hoya lucida. I will be very surprised if someone actually comes out and say, this is definitely Hoya lucida, because there is so much proof that points us in the other direction. And this is why I think this is important, because when you are sure what your plant could be, and you're kind of just asking for a little bit of help because, well, sometimes it's hard to be 100% certain, all of these previous steps are just going to build a very strong foundation. And maybe you're not going to be so close, maybe you'll have more species that you suspect, but at least, you're going to go through all these other steps and you're going to see, well, my Hoya is definitely in the what was then called Basie complex. So if someone suggests erythrina, I'm going to know this is not Hoya erythrina because of, well, step number 1. I know that this is a different corona, but also step number 2, based on the corona, I know where my plant fits and where erythrina fits, and it's not the same, right? This is why I think at least these steps are useful and why it's important if you want to, of course, become good at identification. Maybe you don't want to, and that's perfectly fine. I don't always feel in the mood to identify my Hoya, so sometimes I will take a shortcut and maybe not go through all these steps. But for me, it was very important for whatever reason to do it with this plant. Not everything will be so intriguing. I don't find Hoyas from the Basie complex that are similar to similar to Finlaysoni. I don't find that intriguing at all. I would absolutely take a shortcut there, especially because that's another minefield. But this, it was a less of a minefield, so I was willing. But yeah, I hope this helps. I hope that you find this video interesting. And look, when you buy the plant, if you want to buy Hoya lucida or albiflora, ask for the photos. There is, again, as I said, only one photo of Hoya lucida that was correctly ID'd, aside from the publication that I saw on Instagram, and it's posted by Swedish Hoya Society. I think Alice Scott, another Swedish collector, has this plant, and it has the NS, Natalie Simonson's accession number, so we know this is good because it comes directly from her. And just based on that photo, you can see this is this is different, closely related but different. I am not going to buy Hoya albiflora unless someone can provide me with the photo and tell me I've bloomed it and I'm cutting you from the plant that I've bloomed. Because it's not a cheap Hoya. This was not a cheap Hoya for Farah, so I can't remember. I think we might have traded for this. It's grown well. It's wrapped around several times. But yeah, the price was really, really premium. So that's why I'm not just going to buy neither lucida nor albiflora willy-nilly. I do think I saw one of these plants, maybe albiflora, starting to enter European market wholesale. Be very careful of that, because albiflora is not that easy to get. If you see it in a nursery that doesn't typically hold very rare Hoya, probably avoid it. It's probably going to end up being calycina. Though it should be exciting to introduce Hoya calycina subspecies glabrifolia. I wish someone could confirm this so we can record it well and post it, maybe even make a separate video where I can sort of describe this plant, go even more into detail on the calycina publication, though this is pretty detailed too, because I think it deserves to be easily and identifiable. It's been 4 or 5 hours of recording. I'm losing my words. Anyway, I don't know if this is going to be the last video of the year. Maybe, maybe not. We're going to have more new videos, but in any case, happy holidays, whichever you celebrate. Our Christmas is going to be on January 7th because of the time difference. We are in a different time zone, but also Orthodox Christian. It's actually that. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. I hope that you're having a good time. We will see you. I will see you next year, or maybe even before that. Maybe not. Let me know what you think about doing videos like these. I know this is a lot to take in. I know this is quite complex, potentially boring. Maybe Hoya chores are more fun, but I would like to make a little bit more geeky videos in the future on the Hoya because I think I can do it. I actually have topics for 7 more videos of similar kind, not identifying misidentified Hoya, but geeky Hoya videos. There is the Hoya sections and 2 interviews for next year with people who are in the Hoya world. Stay tuned for that. I'm going to try to get everything out as quickly as I can, but honestly, wait until it's gonna take a while. Like, my goal is 1 video per month of the super geeky stuff. But that is it for this video. Have a wonderful day. See you in the next one. Let me know if you have this plant. If you are in Europe and you have Hoya albiflora, the actual true Hoya albiflora that you have bloomed, get in touch. Perhaps we can try to organize a trade or something in the next year, because I would love to have that plant, and I would love to have Hoya lucida because I absolutely need 2 huge Hoyas in my life. What else? I'm going to also talk about Vandas very soon. I had to put this one here because, oh my goodness, I wanted to get rid of her, but she is obviously staying. Love these. She's a prop here right now. But beautiful dark flower. I don't know how visible that is, but you're definitely seeing her in the future. Video on Instagram @etc. Make sure you're subscribed. I don't know what else to say. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being with me in 2025. A special thank you to all of my patrons for the support. Videos like these are possible because of that, because YouTube algorithm is quite insane, and posting videos once a week, which is quite a tempo, or even once a month, which is, if you really want to do a good research video, that would be the best. Not really possible, but I can always rely on those people to take a moment off when I need it. So thank you so much. Your support means a lot to me. But really, thank you all who are watching, especially to all of you who are leaving the dislikes. Engagement is engagement, baby. So keep doing that. I will see you soon. Goodbye. I need to shut up. And I also think I see a mealybug on my Hoya irisae, which is absolutely going to drive me crazy. Must we finish with chaos? I would like to take some time to thank all of my patrons for their tremendous support all throughout the year. A massive shout out to my How Dare You tier. My 2 anonymous patrons, Alex von Siebenthal, Alexandra Pogorzelska, Anne Margaret Moen, Andrea Jarosh, Andre Hidalgo, Angela Bernard, Angelina Farnan, Anna Malaya, Anna P. Aspen Drake, Basie, Brett Noble, Catherine Molina, Crystal Despain, Connie Pagano, Daniela Danube Daniels, Daria W, Dwight, Edith W, Ellen, Elora Graham, Farah Francis Wilkins, Gathering Moss, Gina Geise, Hannah Matlin, Hoji Scott, Into the Forest, Yana Griffin, Jen C, Jody D. Gomez, Jonas Barhjorth Larson, Joss Kyle, Kara, Catherine B, Kelso, Kimberly Polka, Christy Ehrlich, Laura C, Lee Mooney, Mandy Milliken, Marcel Haar, Mary, Marina Yarmolich, Melissa Walker, Michelle Heron, Mirka Grun-Roos, MJW, Miss Seidenhar, Nelly Yang, Nina Nguyen, Neely Spicer, Nita Macy, PJ, Rachel Peterson, Rebecca C, Sharon Bone, Sherry from SC, Starla Van Lith, Suvi Cordecangas, Tessa Martins, Tia B, Tracy, Trista Bailey, Tristan Thomas, Vampire Siren, Van Alien, Virginia, Senia Green, Youth of the Volumut, Zurdarama, Zaira Rivera, Zlokomnik Pony, and The Flower. Also a big thank you to the Enabler tier, Kilon Shano here, Daryl Del Rosario, Deanna Eden Corlett, Gia Rudolph Savares, Holy Borner, Ivy, Joanna Anna, Kelly Ash, Lindsay Ann, Marisa Kova, Monica Wykers, Oscar Oost, Plant Chrysalis, Ringlov, Steph Fox, VH, Vanessa, www.myhoya.shop, Sania Brown. And of course, thank you to my supporters, Alice Borlin, NC, Brandon Pacheco, Couture Helvetica, Deanne Sikorsky, Dipanjali Rao, Emilia Bronson, Jolie Sullivan, Julie Lafford, Kayla Bavra, Callie Gallagher, Chris Perez, Laura Jackson, Lori Ann Subramaniam, Luzman Fernandez, Mary Diamond, Mary Rose, Olivia Chin Muller, Pacific NW Plant Lady, and Pax Lighting.